one thing is when you're learning and you're not very good at singing, you don't really want to sing very much because you just don't want to hear yourself out loud. You can be sort of sheepish or embarrassed about it. Even in the car, I would
Yeah.
for many years, I just wouldn't want to sing out loud. But in order to get good, you have to sing it loud and proud. You have to be willing to sound like crap until you can learn how to make it sound good.
This time I sit down with Comet Lovejoy, a band hailing from Delaware named after the actual Comet Lovejoy. Fun fact, according to NASA, Comet Lovejoy spews large amounts of alcohol into space, as much as 500 bottles of wine every second. And that's exactly what the band Comet Lovejoy aims to do with their music, spread their spirits across the galaxy. Right now, Comet Lovejoy has 2 songs out, Locket and Slice of Paradise, which you can find wherever you listen to music by searching Comet Lovejoy. Make sure to follow the band on socials so you don't miss out on the release of their debut album, The Dream is Alive. There are 5 guys total in the band, and for this conversation, I sat down with 2 of them, Ryan and Eric. Ryan is the lead singer, guitarist, and songwriter. Eric plays the drums and does a bit of songwriting himself. On this episode, we discuss why you have to go through the crap to get to the good stuff, staying true to yourself as a creative, music through the lens of competition, and how you can develop your sweet, sweet singing voice.
I think a good place to start would be going over the band name and why you guys decided to become Comet Lovejoy, become known as the band Comet Lovejoy. So I have the quote here from NASA that we kind of dove into last time a little bit. I will let you guys, before I get into that quote, preface what drew you to Comet Lovejoy and why you decided to name the band that.
Well, it started as, I think all bands kind of struggle to find a good name, first off. So I think that's some useful context. And we had been searching for a while. And I just remember trying to approach coming up with a name from some sort of, how am I trying to say this? Yeah, the way that I was trying to come up with the name was that, okay, let me find something that I like and something that's interesting and try to, I was really searching a lot of different routes for inspiration of where the name could come from. And I remember just sort of sitting on the couch and I was with Connor, our keyboard player, and the notion of naming the band after a comet sort of came up. And I really like comets because it's a natural thing, but it's also somewhat mystical. And it's something that's really sort of rare and a special thing if you ever catch a glimpse of one. And so I thought, as a starting place, hey, that's really cool. So I started Googling comets, and there's quite a few notable comets out there, like Halley's Comet and Comet McNaught. And then Comet Lovejoy popped up, and it's this really interesting comet, it turns out, that has a pretty fascinating story where it was on course to sort of collide with the sun, and a lot of astronomers were looking at it and they were thinking, oh, is this comet going to crash into the sun? We don't know. And it ends up surviving and in glorious fashion comes out of the other end of its orbit and is glowing this brilliant green color and is spewing alcohol and sugar into the atmosphere. And there's some really great quotes from NASA about the comet. And so I thought it's I really like sort of trying to personify the comet and thinking of it as this really daring figure that was just kind of going for it and risked it all. But I think the Lovejoy element of it is sort of representative of just sort of this playful nature. And we're doing this because we love it. And yeah,
I think it's a lot more about just, being kind of a rogue type. It's like a rogue type energy, but then it is kind of funny because one of the quotes from NASA, I think, was boozy space rock.
Yeah.
Because it was letting off 350 bottles of wine per second worth of alcohol.
Yeah, I have the quote right here from NASA.com, which sounds pretty reputable. It's a pretty reputable company. So they say,
I've heard of them.
yeah, they've done some things. So they say, quote, Comet Lovejoy lived up to its name by releasing large amounts of alcohol as well as a type of sugar into space, according to new observations by an international team. The discovery marks the first time that ethyl alcohol, the same type in alcoholic beverages, has been observed in a comet. We found that Comet Lovejoy was releasing as much alcohol in at least 500 bottles of wine every
500, okay.
every second during its peak activity. And goes on to talk about the boozy space rock, which is also another name for a future band. Boozy Space Rock. But yeah, I thought when I read that definition, I was like, okay, that's pretty cool because you have the ethereal nature of a comet, kind of something that you see and you know it exists, but you will never be able to come close to, at least not in our lifetimes. And you also have the way that it's special, the boozy aspect, and that, you know, that comes into the creative aspect as much as you allow it. The drinking, the not drinking, I feel like that is just a cool fact about that asteroid or that comet that kind of makes me think about the creativity of being in a band.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it kind of plays into a little bit of a rock and roll persona. And I mean, while we're kind of beyond our prime partying years, I think we all kind of had a little bit of that in us in our high school and college selves that, you know, just like to have fun. And, you know, of course, that certainly involves some substances at times. But I mean, really, by the time that we were forming the band, like it actually, you know, it's not really a part of our songwriting process at all to really be like using substances. And so while it's kind of this cool element of the Comet, I think we want to be kind of cautious of playing into that too much because it's not really like what we're about. I think we're all for people having a great time and partying, but we definitely don't want to be that cliche of like the rock band that's
I think the coolest part about Comet Lovejoy is that it was nearly like collide with the sun and, you know, would have vaporized. And and I feel like that very much accurately represents what it's like to be, you know, an artist or doing something that's not extremely like expected of you or straight laced, because you always feel that sense of danger and risk. And but Comet Lovejoy avoided the destruction and continued going on and is going to get into trouble later on in the future. That's kind of how Ryan and I feel sometimes. We're like, some days we're like, oh my God, we're like, you know, it's a high and low type of thing being an artist. You know, you have some good days where you feel like you're on top of the world and other days where you're like,
Yeah, I think just the attitude of just like going for it though, and kind of looking at approaching music as a career, it is this sort of, you know, high risk, high reward situation. So I think part of the story that I liked of the Comet was that it went for it and it survived. And I do think there's a certain element of kind of like the metaphor of sort of sailing toward the sun and trying to reach, you know, whether that be, you know, success or fame or, you know, lots of money. It's all part of the sort of the cliche of of pursuing sort of a successful music career. And it's kind of, you can't have one without the other. Like you can't be a really successful artist without kind of dealing with some of that, you know, not so nice stuff of that, you know, kind of having a public life. But we don't really experience any of that yet, but I think that's
something I wanted to get into, the creative process in a 5-person band that is Comet Lovejoy. For people that have never been in a band, which I imagine is most people listening to this podcast, can you paint a picture of what that creative process looks like kind of from a 30,000 foot view? How does the interaction happen between 5 people? What does the decision-making process look like? What's kind of the general through line that holds together the creative process between 5 people as opposed to a solo project?
I feel like as you start to get to understand and know each other, you kind of fall into your role, whether that's just a musician or whether you're a musician and a songwriter, or whether you like to do a little bit more of the producing or the business end of things. This is all assuming that you don't have the help of like a record label yet. But yeah, you sort of fall into your roles naturally, and if it's a good fit personality-wise, there's not going to be a lot of friction where people are fighting for certain roles. You'll just kind of slip into them. And I've been through over a dozen different bands before I came upon Comet Lovejoy, and
A dozen, damn.
yeah,
Eric's been through.
You've been through the ringer.
I've been
You're a vet.
in bands.
You're a veteran.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in bands consistently since 2008, and
Shit.
It took actually some convincing for Ryan to get me on board, like, fully, because I was so tired of it. It's so rare that you're on the same page. One person takes it more seriously than the others. And that was typically me. I was the one who took it more seriously. And it was really frustrating because I want to have fun, but I also don't want to go in the studio and get blazed and just not get anything done. And
So did you find yourself having to play more of the role of a dictator, kind of, where in the previous bands
I hate it.
I've
had jobs where I've micromanaged people, and I hated those jobs beyond being in a band.
Yeah.
And
No,
it's the
I
worst,
get it.
yeah.
I mean, it seems like it's a blessing to be able to do a podcast, to be in charge of a solo podcast. I may or may not have other voices in my head that are telling me to do certain things, make creative decisions. But like everyone does, like just like the normal voices in your head that are like doubting or telling you like, oh, you should do this or pay attention to this. So like in that sense, maybe there's decisions to be made, but I can't imagine having to be in a group of 5 people with one common product that has to go out. I imagine that's a super difficult relationship.
It can be at times. I mean, the way that I've kind of come to think of it is it's a little bit like, like a 5-stage like filtration system where, we have like an idea for a song and it goes through each of our sort of creative tastes and musical personalities, and we all sort of know kind of what we're trying to add to the song, and it changes a little bit. I mean, all of us kind of have some songwriting abilities and can bring that original idea to the table that we all end up working on, but probably the majority of the time is I'll have something on guitar or some lyrics that I write, or we've done a few songs where Eric and I write it together, and there's been some where Eric just provides the lyrics, and we just kind of start there and get that initial idea of the bare bones of a song where it just works on a single instrument, whether it be guitar or piano and vocals, and then we just kind of work up from there, kind of adding each layer at a time. And I'm sort of in the center of it all, kind of being the producer and recording everyone's parts into the computer. And I'm trying to sort of guide things into place like a Tetris block of sorts where everyone's got their additions to the song, and it's just trying to make it all fit nicely together. And I think over time, the more that we've played together, we kind of understand how to work around each other's musical playing style. And I think that's part of what makes a band great, is that we're making stuff that would not be possible if it weren't for that. It's 5 different people with different ideas kind of bringing it together. And I think a lot of artists these days will just sort of produce everything on their own. And, it's the ideas, a lot of people make great music that way, but I've, before starting the band, was making a lot of music that way myself, where it was just very this inclusive process of every single part was being written by me. And it really, I mean, the way that the band kind of formed actually was just through, me starting to collaborate with Ian, who's our lead guitarist, who's up in New York. And then I had started collaborating, at different times with Connor, who's, a longtime friend and who's now sort of our keyboard player and multi-instrumentalist in the band. And then we had a little thing going, and then Eric sort of came on board, and Eric and I had been friends for like a really long time. And Eric had all of this experience from being in other bands that he brought to our band. And then sort of last but not least was Henry, our bass player, who's actually a guitar player who's just kind of playing bass for us. And he's been like a really good sport about it. But, we all just kind of have, different tastes in music. And we bring, I think, what is sort of our favorite parts of music to each one of our songs. And so what's kind of cool about being in a 5-person group is that sometimes there can be disagreements between ourselves, but it's kind of this check and balance system of trying to iterate and improve an idea until it gets to that place where it's so good that literally all 5 of us are like, this is great, we wouldn't want to change anything. And I think it actually, the process of working with other people and, being a little bit more democratic with how the song takes its shape, and, I think it just improves the end result. But to some degree, there needs to be,
it's kind of a double-edged sword, because you have it, if you were creating something solo, whether it's painting, podcasting, music, whatever, you have one person making all the decisions, and there's one creative filter which may allow you to move more quickly. But there are times where I think it would be useful for someone in podcasting, at least, to tell me, hey, this sucks, you should not put this out, or hey, this could be better, this does not sound as good as it could be, or this idea is shitty, which is what would happen if I had a podcast with 2, 3, 4, 5 people. So it's kind of like one may be more expedient, but the other one, you're getting more of a filter where if it makes it through 5 people and all of you agree that, okay, this idea sounds pretty good, there's probably, I would imagine, more of a chance of that idea working out in its final form than kind of the rogue idea that goes through a single person's head, because that's the last filter. The last filter that goes through an idea is mine. In my brain. So there's nothing, it doesn't pass through anything else before it goes out, which is like exciting and scary at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, and we all have blind spots, I think, when we're doing anything creative, where we tend to sort of, I mean, it can go both ways, where you think your thing is way better than it actually is, or you are being overcritical and you think something's really bad. So, I mean, having just the other perspectives of the other guys in the band, I think really kind of helps things stay on track and, kind of keeps us all in check on just trying to make the best idea possible. And I think, with each person that you share the idea with, you have an opportunity for that person to bring something unique that makes the song better. And what's, I think, the most exciting thing about working on music as a group of people is that when I bring an original idea for a song to the table and we all work on it as a group, it turns out, much different than I expect it to be. And that's, I think, a really beautiful part about, collaborating. And like, I'm sure Eric can agree as well, for like the songs that he's brought to the band, it's like he'll share it with me and then it could end up going, in a totally different direction. But I think as long as we all feel good about it, then it's, then it works.
Yeah. I don't think it's happened yet, and we've written probably 40 songs. I don't think it's happened yet where we just weren't able to really agree on the direction of a song. It's usually everyone kind of has the same goal in mind, and we don't really have to elaborate on it. It's pretty nice. That's why it's so. That's why I realized that this is the group that I need to really try to make it happen with, because if you can find that with people where at the very least you normally have the same goals in mind, and you don't even really have to articulate them, that's pretty rare. That's special.
Yeah.
I think it is.
I think what's kind of cool, sorry, I just want to jump in, the thing that's kind of cool too is that we all, I think, have somewhat of a unspoken agreement where like Eric does this thing on the drum part, and while I could give like some constructive, at the end of the day, it's like it's Eric's drum part. It's what Eric has to go on stage and play. And I think, you know, when we send our tracks to Ian and Ian lays down stuff on guitar, it's like, you know, there's a little bit of give and take. We're like, hey, like maybe let's try this, but I think we try to allow each person of the band to kind of, you know, have some creative autonomy like over their part and what they write. And you know, pretty much every single time it's just worked out great, and we're like, oh, we love that. And that's, I think, that synergy is probably a little bit rare, where we all kind of have enough of an alignment in what we consider to be good music.
So there hasn't been a moment yet where one of you has had an idea that you are convinced this is the idea of all ideas and no one else sees it, but you're like, trust me, we need to do this, because when I think of that, I think of like the Steve Jobs approach, where he's like, people don't want the iPhones because I didn't give it to them yet. Like, fuck the customers. I know they need the iPhone because I can see it in my brain, and I'm going to give it to them. And once I give it to them, they'll want it. There's never been a moment like that yet where you have a song idea that no one else really sees in the band, but you're convinced you need to push it through to the end.
Well, I guess the closest thing we've come to that, and it's not even something that I'm adamant about, is a song I wrote in high school called Cali Bound. And
Cali Bound?
Yeah, it's one of those songs where like it was just kind of like a typical like I want to move to California type song, because at the time that's what I wanted to do. I toured colleges down the coast, and I ended up in Nashville, so totally different.
That's a long way away from California.
Yeah. I was looking for a music business degree, which I stayed in for one semester, in the end.
Fuck it.
Yeah, seriously. I was not a school person ever, including college. It's just not my route in life. But basically, the Caliban song, I had different ideas for where we could take it to make it not like a cliche song. And we're still figuring out how to work it. But the thing is, I don't even know where it's supposed to go. And the other guys and I jammed on it, and because of my persistence of like, I think there's something here, they're like, okay, let's keep seeing how it develops. So, you know, maybe every 2 weeks or every month we'll revisit it and see where it goes. And I think they would honestly tell me if there was like nothing in it, they would say, okay, we should just stop. We should just cut our losses. But I think we can all hear that there's some story that's going to come out of it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
We have no idea where. I mean,
I mean that's true. I feel like for a lot of creative things, you have no idea. You just got to put out the best product, and then whatever listeners or consumers do with it is out of your control.
Yeah, I mean, I think our idea is not our idea, but like a part of our approach is just that no matter what, like let's just explore the idea and see what happens. And I think for the song that Eric's talking about, like it's not really, I don't think it's like reached a place where at least I personally am feeling like, oh yeah, like let's definitely like finish this up and try to release it. A lot of stuff when we explore ideas, it can kind of stay on the shelf for a while, and then like a new idea comes and sparks it and brings it back to life. So I mean, I think generally we just always try to explore each other's ideas and just see what happens. And you never know, you know, we have no idea if that song is going to come out, or if we'll ever finish it, or if it'll be like one of our best songs. It could literally happen any number of ways, but part of being a songwriter and as a creative person is just learning to explore ideas. And yeah, there's a little bit of a give and take that you have to sort of sense, where it's like, yeah, let's just like put this one to rest. And I think generally if you just kind of follow whatever your inspiration is in the moment, it'll take you to the right place. But I mean, actually the example that I was thinking of for your original question, as far as have we ever disagreed on something, was something in related to a song that we're getting ready to finish right now called Delaware. And this is a song that Eric had the idea for, because he found this picture of his mom and Joe Biden from like
Oh
the
shit.
70s or something. Yeah, it's like this really old, like
It was
it's
from
just
like
amazing
81 or
photo.
82 or something.
Yeah, it's like this beautiful like vintage photo. It's like totally cover art worthy. And Eric had sort of pitched the idea to me of like, oh, I found this photo, like let's write a song about Delaware. And my thought was like, yeah, like this would be amazing to write a song about Delaware. And then we kind of ended up writing the song, and it wasn't like, it ended up being more about the landmarks of the songs. And so then like Eric and I were like one of the first times we've ever really had to talk through something and try to get on the same page, because we just weren't for a little bit on it. But I mean, eventually we worked through it and kind of talked through the pros and cons of, I mean, I think part of our thing is like, we don't want to be like a political band. And so we have kind of refrained from trying to insert ourselves in the conversation of any political or global thing that's happening. Like we just kind of want to put our music out there for people and let them enjoy the music and kind of be a healthy escape from all the other stuff that's happening. Like we just don't need to, I mean, we don't have a platform yet for one, but even if I think when we do have a platform, it's really, I think we just kind of want to use it to focus on music. But, we sort of came to this crossroads because like, oh, well, like is using a picture of Joe Biden political or not? But like really, and this is where Eric, made like a really strong point, and where, it's nothing, there's nothing political about using the photo, because it's literally, it's going to be one of the most famous people in the world is from our home state. And Eric and I went to high school right down the road from where this guy lives. And so, most people in Delaware kind of have a photo or have seen this guy in person and have shaken his hand. And it really is sort of a special representation of what it's like to live in a state that kind of feels like a small town, but it's a state.
Yeah.
We had this thing called Founders Day at our high school, where basically like it was commemorating the person who started the school, and I think his grandchildren went there or something. But he would show up there all the time and just sit with us. Mm-hmm. And while he was a vice president, and then when I was a freshman in college and I went home to visit home, just for like a winter break, I was walking into this IMAX theater to see The Hobbit. He was coming out the other side, and he was still wearing his 3D glasses, and he had like Secret Service all around him, but he didn't look. He looked so out of place in the sense of like he's just kind of like he's just good old Joe,
Yeah,
and so there is something really positive about that aspect of it, and we want to. I mean, the reality is, I don't think Joe Biden, as if you just saw a picture of him, it means something political from a statement perspective. Like we're not trying to say anything by having a picture of Joe Biden. However, there's a lot of people when they see a picture of him, they think of hope. It's kind of inspiring to them.
Yeah, I think it kind of depends. If you see a picture of Joe Biden, it says more about the person who sees the picture, how they react, than the actual picture. There's a lot of people in America that would see a Joe Biden picture and be like, oh, fuck that guy. And a lot of people who would think, oh, like, he's going to be the next president of the United States. And some people might be indifferent, just be like, oh, that's a really cool nostalgic moment with Joe Biden.
Well, a good example is my girlfriend's parents are pretty conservative. And she showed them a picture of that picture that we're referring to that, we'll post on our social media stuff soon. And their first reaction wasn't like, Joe Biden. It was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's how a lot of people are going to feel, because it's this old vintage photo. He still has hair,
I mean, in the reality of this, the part of what kind of felt like the final safety net for me on using the picture is that a lot of people are going to look at that picture and they're not even going to know that it's Joe Biden. He's like way younger, and a big reason that we're using it, frankly, is for the marketing potential of, it's a song about Delaware.
Yeah, let's be real.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's exactly why we're doing it. And like the pros just outweigh the cons. I mean, it's definitely going to alienate some people just because inherently using any political figure is going to it's going to polarize people.
Yeah.
And people who are on the extreme ends of the spectrum are going to be like, I'm not going to listen to that song. But I mean, like, we're willing to sacrifice that group of people to reach, hopefully, a lot more people, because really kind of Delaware is being put more on the map because of somebody like Joe Biden becoming president, or we're working with this producer named Tony Dugan, who's from Scotland. And he's like, I've seen Delaware on the news like a few times lately, and it's like the first few times I've seen them in many years. So you guys are, kind of being put on the map now. So I think that
was a decent Scottish accent, actually.
Yeah, thank you, man. Well, we've been doing a lot of Tony Dugan impersonations, as like inside jokes amongst ourselves. This guy's got some hilarious one-liners. It's really been a pleasure to work with him on our music.
Yes,
he's a very funny guy.
And in the spirit of timeless music, for people that hear the song Delaware 20, 30 years from now, I don't think the first thought that pops into their head, even if they recognize Joe Biden in the photo, will be a political thought. Because if I think back on past presidents, like if I think of George Bush, I think of 9/11. If I think of JFK, I just think of this handsome guy that was the president and could speak really well. The first thing that pops into my head of past presidents is not their political affiliation. It's like their legacy that they left.
Who they were as people.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't think Democrat or Republican or any sort of like political affiliation when I think of presidents that have served in office, 10, 20 plus years ago. It's more just like, what did that person do? Even I mean, not to get political, but like even Obama, I feel like he's getting into more of the speaker role now on just general issues, where he's not trying to play sides. He's more just giving his thoughts on what he thinks is happening in the world without the pressure of a campaign. So it's like you're getting more of the taste of who he is.
He's a do or die Democrat, so it's hard for him to be fully objective. But you're right. He's using his God-given talent of speech. I mean, the guy is such a good speaker.
That's the first thing I think of when I think of him. I think of orator, number one. That dude makes you feel safe no matter what the situation is. So
he does. He has sort of this like, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, every time I hear him speak, I'm like, everything's gonna be fine. You guys mentioned before, you were talking about something I wanted to get into is what's
before
up?
We get into that, can I just say one more thing on the Delaware thing?
Of course.
Yeah. The marketing campaign, which we'll reveal a little bit of, is that okay if I go into that, Ryan?
100%.
Yeah. Basically, it kind of plays into the theme of the song. We kind of started to write a list of all the famous people that are either from Delaware or have association with Delaware, besides Joe Biden. And it's like, we came up with like 25, 30 people. And we just thought, this is great. This is like a song representing that even the smallest little place, which is Delaware, which most people, by the way, think is a city. They don't realize it's a state. Great people can come from small places. And we're also going to tie it in. So we're going to try to get people who are associated with Delaware to share it on social media. And also we're going to tie it into COVID Relief Fund. That's going to, there's going to be a link to donate locally if you live in Delaware, and then to donate to Delaware COVID Relief if you live somewhere outside of Delaware. My aunt is heavily involved in some of the charity works in Delaware, and so I try to get those resources. So we feel like it's going to be success because it's an excuse to name drop sort of an obscure place, and then also to do something good, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, we just kind of hope to.
Who's another reputable person from Delaware that you guys have in mind? That would be a dream if they shared the song.
Aubrey Plaza.
Aubrey Plaza.
Aubrey Plaza's from Delaware? No
Yeah,
fucking
man.
way.
Exactly. See, you would have never known. Yeah, so
I would have never
yeah,
known.
really,
Joe
We-
Flacco.
Joe Flacco,
Well,
I
he was
knew
not even
he went
from-
to University of Delaware.
that's it.
The Blue Hens, the Blue
I think
Hens.
he's actually from.
Is it?
Yeah, Blue Hens. Yeah.
Well, he has an
yeah.
association, so
He-
it's okay.
I mean, Joe Flacco could get a free beer anywhere he goes in Delaware, so he counts.
Sure.
That's
Yeah,
true.
I mean, I think really the song is about trying to shed some light on what's great about Delaware, and the lyrics ended up being more about the landmarks. We have like wonderful beaches, wonderful state parks. It's really quite a beautiful place, and it's a great place to kind of be right now for us because it's right in the middle of a lot of the hubs on the East Coast. So once live shows come back, it's not a bad home base to have for the time being because we're a 3-hour drive away from New York City.
Yeah.
An
Less
hour
than
drive
that.
away from Philadelphia, Baltimore, DC. Like really, we could.
We're less than an hour away from the mountains to ski, less than an hour away from the beach.
So
Yeah. And
Rehoboth is Delaware, right? Rehoboth
Yeah,
Beach.
exactly.
I remember that
And
from my baseball
Dave
days.
Dave Grohl goes to either Rehoboth or Bethany every summer with his family. So
Really?
we're gonna try to get him to,
You gotta
share.
get-
We're just hoping
you
to,
gotta get 'em on it.
ride. We're hoping to ride on a wave of Delaware pride, so that Comet Lovejoy becomes one of the things in the long list of things that people are proud of Delaware.
Someone 10 years from now will make a song about Delaware, and Comet Lovejoy will be their
Exactly.
top option for people that they want to share the song. Above
Hey,
Aubrey,
we gotta
Aubrey
win.
Plaza, above Joe Flacco, above Joe Biden, Comet Lovejoy.
Hey, Comet Lovejoy worldwide, baby.
I'm calling it right now. I'm calling it right now.
Hey, I mean, it's possible, right? Maybe not bigger than Joe Biden because probably
that's-
everyone in the world's going to know about him. But who knows?
Everyone
see.
does know.
I mean, we'll see.
if we get to Coldplay status as far as like recognition, I think that would. I don't know.
100%.
I mean,
Do you
long-
think Coldplay is known more than the actual president? I don't think so, but
President of what?
Coldplay internationally, I think for sure they have a huge international audience because don't they sell out stadiums in like South America, Europe?
yeah, they do. I'm just thinking like it would be absolutely nuts if
Coldplay
somebody
is like
Chris-
Coldplay is like the soccer of sports. You might not think they're popular in the United States, but if you go internationally, it's the most popular sport in the world.
Yeah, that is a really good analogy, actually, for
Yeah.
Coldplay.
Yeah, no one gives a fuck about soccer in the United States, and once you get outside, it's like soccer's the only
I
thing.
do.
It's true.
we were just playing FIFA, man.
We were
We
just
love
playing
soccer.
Yeah, that means we know so much about soccer.
Most people. I'm an uneducated soccer fan.
Well, it's because you're a baseball player, Zach. You have it. It's in your blood to have a little bit of a disdain for soccer and.
Yeah, you're an all-American boy.
I would say that I've
all American baseball boy.
I've kind of gotten away from sports in general after I stopped playing. I want to get back
Me too,
into
man.
baseball because it's the sport I love and the sport I played forever. I'm also willing to give soccer more of a chance too. I don't think I really the reason okay, so soccer and baseball are both slower sports. And what I mean by that is
yeah.
it could be 3 runs per game or 3 scores per game. But I think baseball is more exciting because I understand the nuances of baseball. So someone hits a ground ball to a shortstop and it takes a bad hop, but they field it cleanly and throw it to first base. I know that was a really hard play that doesn't really look like it, but I know how hard it is to field a ground ball or to pick a ball out of the dirt. So I'm like, I see that on TV. I'm like, oh shit, that was fucking sick. But soccer, I don't have the same understanding because I never really played soccer.
Anything that you know the nuance of, you'll have much greater appreciation for. I mean, it goes with sports, it goes with any creative pursuit, it goes with business, it goes with anything. But no, I think you're absolutely right. It's like there's a lot of people that don't like soccer because they didn't grow up with that being the emphasis when they were a kid. Like, Americans are very insular about like their sports choices. With basketball, we have so many good ones. We have basketball, football, hockey. I know that maybe that started in Canada or Russia, but we're big into hockey. So
Yeah. So
It's probably.
what were you gonna say, Ryan?
I was gonna say it's worth mentioning that the reason that we know each other is because we played baseball
Yes.
together at Richmond. So I mean that's kind of a fun fact to drop.
Yeah, no.
that's true.
Yeah, I was gonna get into this at some point. It's definitely a good time to bring this up. That yes, me and Ryan Donnelly of Comet Lovejoy. Before he was in Comet Lovejoy, he was a Richmond Spider on the University of Richmond baseball team, and that was where we met and we became friends. And something I wanted to ask you that has to do with baseball is how do you rationalize or how do you combine your conditioning growing up as a baseball player, middle school, high school, college, that competitive spirit with creative fields? It's something like music, because that's something that I find myself thinking more and more about. Is I can feel myself becoming less competitive in a healthy way since I've stopped playing baseball. I still think it's good to have that edge that comes from growing up in a win or lose mentality, but it's obviously not healthy to think like that all the time. And I did think like that in many situations where I should not have thought like that when I was still playing baseball. So how do you kind of think of competition in the realm of music, having grown up as a baseball player?
I think, yeah, it's an interesting topic. I mean, I think my many years of playing baseball and sports definitely left like an imprint on my psyche that I'm still trying to understand. Something about baseball and being a pitcher with both Zach and I were pitchers is that, you do something and then you sort of wear a win or loss, and it's very sort of like black and white, where like you lost the game for your team or you won the game for your team. And of course it's not actually how the game goes. There's all these other variables, but there's some sense of, I don't know. There's like a lot of, I mean, I think this is somewhat common in a lot of sports, but if you have a bad outing or you have a bad game, like you just kind of like wear this like awful guilt around like letting, your teammates down and kind of, just feeling like your worth as a person is tied to this number and this performance that you gave. And I think for
100%.
me, what I had to really kind of like untrain that part of myself when starting to approach music, is because I just had this like really negative and critical sort of self-talk that I kind of took from having harsh coaches and frankly just being in really competitive atmospheres where even within a team of people, you're all friends, but there's still this like this inner rivalry and this sort of like, it's not always a super safe space as far as just like this outpouring support for one another. I mean, there's, in college it's kind of different. I mean, it's a little bit of that's there, but played on like travel teams and stuff where people barely knew each other and you're coming on. There's just a little bit of this, the competitive mentality is the way that I kind of apply it to music is pretty like insular, where I try to just focus it on like being the best that I can be and putting forth my best effort, and not trying to tie it to we're not performing as well as these other bands, and trying to let the numbers come into play. Because in sports, in a sport like baseball, where it's so statistic based, like your worth as a player is tied to your metrics as like batting average, home runs, RBIs. And as a musician, like you can't do that. You can't determine your worth.
It's a lot more subjective anyway.
Yeah, and so I think that's actually kind of nice. What I like about music is that, we can make something that we love. If everyone else hates it, it's not, of course there's a personal part of us that'll be probably a little butthurt about it. But at the end of the day, there's not this, nobody can really tell you if you're a winner or a loser. It's like, no, like we're just us. There, you can't, so
yeah, it's
the competitive. Yeah.
I was going to say it's, what is nice about competition is that you do have a clear winner and loser. If you are a pitcher and you're going against a batter, someone is going to win that at bat. Someone is either going to get to first base, hit a double off you, hit a home run, or they're going to walk their ass back to the dugout, which is, I think there's an advantage to be able to challenge a competitive spirit as a creative when it's necessary. There's a quote by Peter Thiel that goes something like, it's not nearly as important how you compete as it is when you compete, because it's like people think that they're in competition when they're really not, and they are competing with things that they don't need to be. But I do think it's important to channel a competitive spirit at times in creative fields, and I feel like now I've gotten to a point where it is an edge, where in the past it's kind of hindered me. The first 2 or 3 years podcasting, but it's a weird thing to think about. Like I was just listening to Trevor Bauer speak on a podcast, who pitches for the Cincinnati Reds, just won the Cy Young Award, which, if you're not familiar with baseball, that's the best pitcher in major leagues. You're the best pitcher on the planet if you win the Cy Young. And he described himself as not a happy person. He said, if I was describing myself, I'm not a particularly happy person. And one of the things he's working on as a 29-year-old pitcher, he's been in the league for almost a decade, is being happy as a person. So he's at the upper echelon of competition. He is in the top 0.00000 repeating 1% of pitchers to ever be born on this planet. And yet he is figuring out how to be happy a decade in his career, which says a lot about competition and feeling fulfilled. He totally. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense to me. I mean, I think I feel that at times when I get into that really competitive mindset of that, it's never good enough, and you always have to, beat your past self. I think there's this notion that I had as a pitcher, where it's, if you do a good job, you don't even celebrate it. That's just like, that's what you were expected to. If you expect like excellence out of yourself, you can perform to the 100% best of your abilities, and like that, at the end of the day, you're just walking away feeling satisfied. You're not even feeling happy if you're in this like really sort of toxic competitive mentality, and anything below that, even if it's,
I wouldn't even say that you would be satisfied, right? Because satisfaction implies satiation. I think it would be more of, I'm not going to get in trouble.
Yeah, I'm not going to get in trouble, or I don't have to feel bad about what I did. So I mean, I think, and there's people like Michael Jordan and these people who, when you see it in like Kobe Bryant interviews too, where they talk about things and like they play this amazing game, and like they're not allowing themselves to celebrate at all. And I think I think there's a part of that is always, it's a layer of my consciousness that I have to reckon with at times. But for the most part with music, I've learned to just kind of celebrate imperfection and embrace that as part of what makes art and music good, is that it's not this perfect thing. And that, I mean, I think the one thing that is really useful though is being able to flip that switch on and get into that like game mode mindset of like, it's time to perform, and kind of getting like fired up. And it kind of comes into play. It'll definitely come into play when we start playing live shows, but where it comes into play now is just if we're recording and I'm like, all right, like I've recorded 10 takes, they all sucked, like, and I just kind of get like mad at myself, like just to the right amount where it's like, I'm going to nail this and I'm going to like push through and like get the job done. And it does come in handy for stuff like that, just to get that extra push, like being able to sort of cultivate that fire within yourself to just kind of push forward. And it's like it's like
100%. There's people don't stay the same when the lights come on, whether you're pitching in front of 50,000 people in a stadium or you're performing in front of 50,000 people, or even 500 or 1,000 people at a local venue in the city. People don't stay the same when the lights come on. They either shrink or they rise to the occasion. When the lights come on, they're one of two directions you're going to go. And I feel very strongly that as I've learned to have a more of a healthy relationship with competition, that I'm grateful for being a baseball player, because it helps you flip that switch in a positive direction where you rise to the occasion more often than not, and you go beyond what you're capable of technically and as a performer.
Yeah.
Because there are other people watching you and because the lights are on. And if there's one thing, going off what you said, Ryan, about judging yourself after competition, if there's one thing I would tell myself as a 13 14-year-old freshman in high school with dreams of being a baseball player, is you are going to want to treat people so kindly after you perform well, and you're going to want to treat people like shit after you pitch like shit, you play like shit. Cultivate a distance between your performance and the way that you treat other people. Have the same outlook once the game is over. Whatever you're going to do after, if you're going to go out with your friends, go out with your friends. If you were going to have dinner with your family, have dinner with your family. Whatever it is, like, don't let the performance affect the way that you treat other people, which is so fucking hard. But that's something I don't think I ever truly got to the root of while I was a baseball player. I kind of lived and died by how I performed. I would be super nice to people when I pitched well for the entire week, and I would treat people not as great. I would treat people like shit sometimes because I didn't have a good performance.
Well, it's tough when it's like becomes that big of a part of your identity. It's hard to make that separation. I mean, something that, I think that ultimately sort of led to me, leaving the team my sophomore year is that, at the end of the day, like, I was a good baseball player on like a high school and like in like our little small state of Delaware. But like when it came to competing with like Division I athletes and people who just, I think frankly, just cared a lot more than I did, like I was like really bad in comparison to the and it made me feel, like I was just a bad person because I couldn't perform at this certain level. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's like I think for people who are really competitive and athletes, I mean, the sport that they play kind of has to become their life. I mean, I think that sort of obsessiveness is somewhat necessary to succeed to the highest extent. But, I think there's room to just realize it's just a game. It doesn't really matter. And I think I can sort of take some of that approach to music where it's like, it really doesn't matter. And, as far as you talking about, performing in front of big groups of people and you either rise or you let your nerves get the best of you. I've had so many experiences where I did horribly in big games or in situations where there was a ton of pressure on me, and, leading into, a life of becoming a performer. It's like, I just know that that's inevitable too, where there's going to be times where I embarrass myself to a grand extent in front of a ton of people. And one thing that I get a little bit of solace from. Yeah.
You were going to be the one that's most horrified. No one else is going to really care that much.
Yeah.
But even at the end of the day,
when you guys are selling out Terminal 5 and there's 3,000 people buying Comet Lovejoy tickets, they're all rooting for you to do well. No one's paying money for a ticket to see Comet Lovejoy being like, I'm going to drop this $30 so I can see these guys choke on stage. Like
that is one nice difference from sports where you're less likely to be booed if
everyone is rooting for you to do well when you're at that point.
Even if you fail horribly and you really embarrass yourself, it's temporary. I mean, like now everything's on camera, but still it'll fade into the back of people's memories, and you always get that next at bat, that next time to perform. And so I think that's like the best full circle way I can talk about how baseball has kind of approached my thought process toward music, is because, the fact that I've failed at baseball, so, in front of so many people and had these horrible games, I've also had great games and big moments, and then you feel like you're on top of the world. And, I've felt both extremes. From that standpoint, I feel prepared and at least kind of know what to expect into the realm of live performance with music, where, we're going to be up there and like, I'm sure like especially at first, it's going to be, my nerves are going to be a wreck. It's
Yeah.
probably going to be like almost debilitating until you just learn to get through it. And then, you know, you do it enough times. Like, I almost wonder, you know, like if you put yourself back in some of the situations where you probably had in college where you're playing a big game, there's like a lot of pressure, a lot riding on it. Like, it felt like second nature to you at the time. But I mean, if you were to be put in that situation now, you probably feel like a little bit uncomfortable just because you're out of practice with having that sort of, but I mean, maybe you're kind of used to it with podcasting. I mean, that's a similar amount of pressure to perform, I would imagine. It's a little different, but
Yeah, but it's different when you're recording podcasts and then releasing them to people because the audience isn't really there. But I get your point though, where if you were put back in that position, it would kind of smack you in the face with competition, which I think now, just with some of the growth that I've gone through in terms of my arm is not nearly in the same shape as it was, but my mind, in terms of meditating and doing some internal evaluation of what I really want out of life, I think I would maybe be a little bit looser because I don't have the same do or die attitude in terms of sports, where I would identify with the success of, you know, pitching 2 innings or pitching 5 innings or something like that.
I think that there's different things that drive you. I mean, there could be people, you know, there can be external factors that are driving you, like, oh, I want to be better than this person or that. But I feel like the most satisfying one is the one that comes within. You know, you're sort of like that you experience more when you're doing sports that aren't team sports, you know, because you're just trying to beat your record from the past. But there's one thing you said about rising to the occasion. You know, when the lights come on the stage, what did you say? Like, you either
shrink
or
you either shrink or you rise. You don't stay the same when the lights come on. One of two things happens to you.
There was a situation in the summer of 2013 when I was living in Atlanta where I was on the way to a show and I had a fever. I felt so bad. And I was like, guys, I cannot go on. And they're like, you have to go on. you can't just not go on. I was like, oh, okay, fine. And I went up and I did black out once during the set. However, I rose to the occasion. I played one of the best shows I've ever played. And at the end of the show, I wasn't sick anymore. It was really weird. Yeah. But there's some people, I must have just sweated it out or something. But you'll know if you're doing the right thing for yourself, you know, whether it's baseball or whatever passion you're experiencing, when you just by default rise to that occasion and put on a good performance. And it does take practice, but you know, eventually you'll get there. And that's the most satisfying thing, more than beating another team or any of that stuff. Beating the odds within yourself, in a sense.
Yeah. So something I wanted to ask you guys, because you mentioned that you as a band have recorded 40 plus songs, something in that realm, or have worked on 40 plus songs, and you have a couple songs out now and you're about to release more coming up. For people who have not gotten a peek behind the curtain of the music industry, and I kind of thought this way before I started speaking to music artists, you can almost think that an artist is only working as much as the songs that they release. But there are, you know, you guys, and there are people that aren't releasing music during quarantine that may have recorded, you know, 10, 20, 100 songs in quarantine, and they're deciding which ones to release. Can you guys speak on the process of recording songs out of the spotlight before you decide which ones you want to release, and having to decide which ones you want to show to the world, and kind of like that pressure to be available to your fans, but also you want to make sure that what you're putting out is the best product as possible.
Yeah, I mean, well, so much of it has come without any pressure of having an audience at all for us, because we really were able to form our sounds and form our relationship with each other as a band before, thinking of releasing music. And, we mentioned that we've written 40 songs together, but there's an even larger catalog of songs that were attempted to be finished before that just were really just a stepping stone toward reaching even the next 40 songs that are actually in consideration to be released. And even within that, you kind of are able to narrow down, well, these are the 10 songs that feel like it best represents us, that we're the most excited about. And as far as deciding what stuff to release, I think part of it is just, what feels like it's ready, what makes sense in the context of the times that are happening. I mean, like, for one thing, we were working on, before this whole pandemic thing happened, we were working on an album which was planned to be our first album, called The Dream Is Alive. And we had pretty much like 12 songs that were at least in some demo form that we were ready to kind of move forward and try to promote. We were rehearsing, ready to play our first live shows in, summer, hopefully. We didn't really know. But then when all this happened, it's kind of like, oh man, like, we can't be, like, there's no context for music about, going out and pursuing your dreams right now with everything being locked down. It felt like the dream was not alive. But in some sense, there is, like, I think there's a part of context that plays a role. And really, it was because we couldn't really get together as a band anymore to work on that stuff. And so, a big part of our workflow leading up to that material was we were rehearsing to play shows, and we were starting to gel as a band. And when that happened, it was like, oh man, like, I just don't want to work. I don't want to work on these songs until we can all play as a group together. And so in replacement of that came, like, well, let's just start something else in the meantime, like, while all this stuff is happening in the context of the pandemic. And, I think it's been a really reflective time for all of us, not having the ability to meet up with friends. We're spending a lot more time with ourselves, a lot more time consuming media and reflecting. And it led to, I guess, like, a new batch of songs, which we are still kind of working on. And
they're more introspective.
They're more introspective. They're sort of around this theme of window, and we don't really know if it's going to be an album. We're just kind of committed to releasing stuff as singles at this point, to build an audience. Like, we just need to get stuff out there. And I don't think
I feel like singles are where it's at right now, because people's attention spans are so short that it's like, if you release an album, maybe with the way that Spotify and Apple Music promotes stuff, maybe one song or two songs will make it on the playlist, and then the other ones people may overlook because it came out with 12 to 15 songs at once. But I feel like there are artists that have kind of embrace the single aspect, where they're like, all right, we're going to put out one song every month or whatever it is, and we'll just keep doing that until something hits a certain level.
I feel like us doing singles right now is sort of a necessary evil, because it's going to be hard to build an audience off of albums. And we also don't have, like, the financial means to do it, because we've established a workflow where we have a producer who, it's not really that cheap to make a whole album, especially with no funds. But we want to be an album band. Because, like, our favorite music is stuff where you can play it from front to back, and it's like this journey, it's this listening experience, it's immersive. We want to have that type of music, but we have to build an audience through the singles. So I definitely agree that the singles are something that we have to embrace until we have that, like, core dedicated group of fans who are going to be excited about an entire collection of songs that work well together.
And it's really hard to finish a song, especially when you're kind of like in our position, where we were just figuring, like, this whole year was dominated by us just figuring out, like, how to finish a song that we could really feel proud of and that would stand the test of time. And we went through this experience of releasing or trying to put together an EP to release that was, now it's on our SoundCloud, but we decided to not put it on Spotify because we we did kind of get into the mindset of like, we just need to rush and get music out. And we kind of cut some corners. We didn't give ourselves enough time to finish it and explore the songs to the fullest extent. And we've kind of gone back to this mentality of like, let's focus on just quality over quantity for right now and take it one song at a time. And with each time that we work on a song from front to finish, we get our workflow more refined. And I think we're getting to that place where now that we have the blueprint of making music the way that we want and at the quality that we want, we can get a little faster each time with it. And part of that was, deciding to link up with a producer, as Eric mentioned, and somebody who can help just put the final touches on things. Because that's one thing that's really tough as being an artist. And especially if you're trying to record and produce it and mix it yourselves, is you have to listen to that song so many times over and over again. And at some
point
you just
perspective from the outside.
You completely lose your mind. You lose your objectivity to it. And so it makes it impossible to finish for some people. And I think,
Tony Dugan's a great producer for us as well, because as a producer, Ryan is very detail oriented. He's like, he loves all the bells and the whistles and the textures and the things I think that make our music pop in a unique way. Mm-hmm. And Tony is like this sort of no bullshit Scotsman, and he's sort of just like, he's like, either feature it or fuck it off. And he's just like, it's very hard lined, broad strokes. And when you have that yin and yang aspect of them together, you do create this great sound. And we were missing something, and we found him, and it kind of completed what we needed to get the music out. That my big rule of thumb is you're doing it wrong if you're releasing music that you have to make excuses for. Like, we could have done it better this way, but it's not. We're going to record something down the road. Don't worry. Like, we wanted to release music that would be like, boom, here it is. Have fun listening to it.
I think that you're recording it wrong, or you're doing it wrong if you're releasing music you have to make excuses for.
Right. And I kind of felt like we were getting ready to put out this EP, and it's like, oh, but like they're just demos, like we're going to make it better later. And it's like, that's like the least exciting thing to do, is to try to work people's excitement up for something that you just know is not as good as it could possibly be. And, I think we went through this process of trying to mix and do it all ourselves, which is, I think it's a little bit romanticized, the idea of the producer and the artist who's doing everything themselves. I mean, I think you look at a lot of these electronic music producers and people like Kevin Parker from Tame Impala, who are like notorious for sort of doing every single bit of the production themselves. And this sort of goes back to the mindset of being in a band. It's sort of embracing collaboration and embracing the strengths of people where you might have weaknesses. And I think for us, it's like, I know that I'm very good at production and very good at mixing for certain things, but I don't have the full picture. Like, I'm not, at least with where I'm at right now. And it took, some self-awareness. And, quite frankly, like, I think there was a part of me that was fighting it mentally of like, no, like you can figure it out on your own. Like you can do it yourself. But it was like this huge relief to just bring another producer, somebody with, years of experience, to just kind of pick apart, our song Locket is the first thing that we worked on with him. And that's just like, it's this really complex song with a lot of layers and a lot of like weird arrangement changes. And so he really helped bring out the magic of that song. And I learned, what felt like years worth of production knowledge just by seeing somebody who is a professional do it. And
we have like a shared screens thing, so he can see like what he's doing with each dial and every plug-in. And
like, even though he's working in Scotland on it, we actually, it's a workflow through Zoom, and something kind of similar to Zencaster, but like we could just hear the audio of what he was working on in the studio. And that was this cool process. But, at the end of the day, just the collaboration and getting the insights and his fresh set of ears really just kind of took the song to a new place in a better way. So that's
speaking of going to a new place in a better way, Ryan, this is something that I wanted to get into with you. You on TikTok, at least, you've posted videos being upfront about working on your voice, your vocals, and kind of the process that you've went through with that. I think for people who have never sang seriously, which I include myself in that. I've just been kind of as a meditative thing, have been looping instrumentals on GarageBand and just trying to sing over them as like a way to get away from podcasting. But can you talk about? Yeah, exactly. I love it. Shout out to GarageBand. Can you talk about improving your voice and your voice as a malleable instrument? Because I think a lot of people have this idea where you're born with the first thing that comes out of your mouth when you try to sing a song, and it is what it is, and it's not going to get any better.
Yeah, no, I'd love to talk. That's a great question. I think to establish some context, I was not one of those people who was just born with a natural inclination for singing. And even until very recently, I had producers tell me like, oh, you should try to find somebody else to sing this, or people who were close with me in my life being like, oh, like your voice isn't just very good. And frankly, my voice wasn't fully developed yet, but I kind of held on to this thing of like, I can figure it out, like I can improve this. And some things that really helped me were actually taking vocal lessons, and I did this as like elective classes in my school. So I kind of worked it into I took a vocal class at Richmond when I was there in undergraduate, and when I went to NYU for my master's degree in music technology stuff, I took a semester with a vocal coach there as well. And there's a lot of technical things that are just great to learn as a singer, because I think there's a lot to it. It's more than just belting it out. There's technique and sort of where you try to power your voice. And at the end of the day, it's really good to just get a foundation of what is proper technique so that you can learn to control these sort of different elements of your voice. You kind of have like a head voice where there's these different resonances in your body that you sort of are combining to, and then using your mouth as sort of this final filter to like shape the sound. And yeah, so I mean, the first thing I'd recommend is get some like professional help, or whether it's tutorials. I'm sure there's amazing YouTube resources where you have somebody who can just kind of push you out of your comfort zone as well too. Because I think one thing is when you're learning and you're not very good at singing, you don't really want to sing very much because you just don't want to hear yourself out loud. You can be sort of sheepish or embarrassed about it. Even in the car, I would for many years, I just wouldn't want to sing out loud. But like, in order to get good, like you have to sing it loud and proud. You have to be willing to sound like crap until you can learn how to make it sound good. And the final part of that is recording yourself singing so that you can hear yourself back, because I think a lot of people have this shock whenever they hear their voice back on a recording. And I mean, for me, it's like, you hear yourself singing just from the perspective of inside your own head, and it can sound totally different. And I definitely went through that process of starting to record my voice on stuff and just being like, oh my God, is that what I sound like? Like, God damn.
I've learned that it's because your the sound waves that you're emitting are vibrating against your skull or something, and that's why your voice sounds different,
sounds fuller, and
like I like the sound of my voice when I'm hearing it, but when I hear it on the recording, I'm like, oh my God.
I go through the same thing when I'm editing podcasts. I almost have to imagine that it's another person's voice, because I don't like hearing myself speak at all, which is interesting because during this pandemic, I started fucking around, just singing on GarageBand, watching some YouTube tutorials, and I don't hate my singing voice. When I first started editing podcasts, I hated my speaking voice, and for whatever reason, like it's not a great singing voice, but I can tolerate it more than my speaking voice when I'm listening back to it. And
I hate both. I hate both of mine.
You hate both? I mean, okay.
Of mine, not yours.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes me feel better. That makes me feel better.
Yeah. Just had to make sure that sunk in so that we didn't continue the conversation with you feeling like Eric just insulted
dissed you on your own program.
No, fuck it. I mean, that would be a test of competitiveness. Or am I going to shrink or grow to
just
when the lights come on? Yeah.
Well, one thing I want to grab onto what you said is like thinking about it as not being yourself, and there's a part of
Disassociation.
that I definitely use whenever I'm singing and working on stuff, because I mean I have to listen to myself, for like all day at times, and I think once I record it, I don't really think about it as like, oh, this is my voice anymore. It's just part of the song, and maybe that's helped me a bit kind of move past it and just sort of approach it objectively, where if I don't sound good on a take, I'm just sort of like, oh, whatever, it wasn't a good take, like let me just redo it. I try to not take it. I think some people feel like if you have a bad voice, you equate it to being like a bad person, or I think some people feel really embarrassed that they don't have this amazing singing voice right off the bat. And the other thing too is something that I learned from a vocal coach as well, is that everyone has a unique voice, and a lot of people run into trouble when they try to sing in a way that sounds like something that's
Someone
just not
else,
meant
yeah.
for their voice. Yeah, like because I thought that I was a really bad singer for a lot of years because I was trying to sing along to singers who just have a totally different voice than me. And it's like, I know now that I have a certain register that I'm able to sing well in, and whenever I am singing out of that register, it sounds really bad. And part of being a songwriter is writing songs for my voice to sound good in. So
that's something I realized just as an amateur fucking around on GarageBand when watching tutorials. Is one of the main takeaways from the tutorials I watched is everyone has that pocket where their voice sounds good. You could take anyone on the planet, and 99% of those people, you can give them a register, like a pocket where you can be like, stay in this pocket, and your voice will sound decent. Like, you may not be the best singer in the world, but people won't hear it, and they're not gonna start throwing up. Like, it'll sound like a serviceable like it'll sound like a
Just
service
projectile vomiting.
yeah, like it'll sound like a serviceable voice to that person. And so that was part of my experimentation, where I was like, all right, like, what's my pocket? Like, where can I sing in?
It's like one note.
And it basically, like, I can't go, like, I was trying to like go up high, and like my voice would start to crack. I'm like, all right, I can't go that high. Like, all this stuff where I'm just like fucking around in that pocket and having different instrumentals and different keys and learning what sounds good and what doesn't. It was kind of like this whole learning process for me during quarantine of like, how do I sing in a way that is not just good in general, because I wouldn't describe it as good, but something that's good for me, like a register.
Out of curiosity, sorry to cut you off, Ryan. Out of curiosity, are you singing just for your own, like as a hobby, or are you trying to do something with it, like that?
Just as a hobby. I realized one of the first things I did is I took the song "Hot Girl Bummer" by Black Bear, and I kind of remixed it with the lyrics to be "Fuck Corona" anthem. So for people that know the song "Hot Girl Bummer," it's like I replaced the lyrics and made it sound like "Fuck Corona" anthem. This turn it up and throw a tantrum. I'm not really singing it right now, but like, I basically replaced the lyrics with something that was in line with the times, basically like "Fuck coronavirus." And I realized that for 2 hours, I didn't think about anything else besides making that song. And it was kind of this meditative experience. And so I don't want to do anything with it besides just put out these fucking bum ass remixes on SoundCloud that I put under an alternate name. And I made a Drunk Face remix by Machine Gun Kelly, where I like taking songs that are way different than these instrumentals I find. So if I find an upbeat song like Drunk Face, I'll put it over an acoustic instrumental and I'll try to sing it. Or if I find like a slower song, I'll put it over like a hard trap beat and try to like make it work like that. I'll basically take the lyrics from something and I'll try to sing it over another instrumental in key. So that's basically my meditation during quarantine.
Yeah, man. Singing is just a great thing for the spirit and for the soul. I mean, I think it's great to just do it for the fun of it and to not try to tie it to, to not try to commercialize it. I think that's, you know, we make music because we love doing it, and we want to commercialize it because that's what we want to spend all of our day doing. But there is a little bit of when you start to put the pressure on trying to make it financially viable, it unfortunately does sort of take some of that natural joy that you might have for it.
I think when we write music, though, we're just writing the music that we want to listen to and that we want to hear, and it just happens to be commercial because we have more of a pop sound.
No, you're right. I mean, whenever we're writing the song, like that is our meditation. That is like when we are so happy. The rest of the world, the walls just dissolve, and we're just like in our studio making stuff, and there's no thought about who's going to think what about this. It's just like, what do we want to do? And that's the freedom of pursuing art, where, there's no rules for it and you can kind of just express yourself. But I mean,
that's a good way to think about it. That's a good way to think about it. Putting things out into the world that you wish were out there, things that you want to consume that don't exist.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think part of what even got me into the notion of becoming a music producer at all was just because I felt like I had good taste in music, but I couldn't find enough people making music that I liked. And almost out of like a frustration of like this feeling like, oh, like I could do this if I wanted to. And like that started when I was in high school. But, it's this sort of thing was like, well, then prove it. That's like, the natural follow-up voice in the back of your head. And it took me a while to just be like, fine, I am going to try it. And I'm going to download stuff and start messing around, and then started the long, near decade-long journey of making stuff that I wanted to sound great, and it fell short consistently for years and years and years until you eventually kind of hone the craft. And now, I mean, I feel like the songs that we're putting out, we feel like is, worthy of being our own favorite songs, if not for somebody else's. And that's, it's just something that took a whole lot of time. And, for just even circling back on the voice thing, I mean, even just to get to a place where, it all kind of happened in reverse for me. I think some people get into music because they're like an amazing singer when they're like 4. And so the whole rest of their lives, they have people telling them, oh, you're so talented at this, you have to pursue it. Like for me, it was the other way around. Like baseball was the thing that it was like, oh, you're left-handed, you're tall, you can be this great player. And I kind of felt obliged to pursue it out of, people's expectation. But music was the thing where it's like, I have like no business becoming good at this. There's nobody who has any expectation, like, and there's something liberating about just going into it and just being like, I don't have anything to lose here. There's nobody's expecting this of me, and I can just slowly improve and do my own thing. And, certainly there's a part of me inside that was like, kind of knew that I had a potential for it. And even when I couldn't sing well, I just kind of believed that I'd figure it out eventually. So yeah, where all this is going, I don't really know, other than just,
that's okay. That's the nature of a long form podcast. You don't have to know where it's going.
I have to say about his singing voice though, when did you move out of Brooklyn, Ryan? Again?
I don't know.
It was like 2018, like what, fall or something?
Yeah, I think it was I think I moved home in the winter of 2019, starting that new year. Or maybe it was 2008. No, I think it was
2018, yeah. Well, the point is, I think it was fall of that year. Mm-hmm. But when I would visit him, and I didn't visit him too long before he moved, he was like showing me some of his demos, and the improvement that took place both from his singing voice and his songwriting from, I think, for about fall of 2018 to like 6 months later, pretty much was like
quantum
crazy.
Yeah, it was.
I don't
honestly,
know how you did.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a weird thing for me to have perspective on, because it's just one of those things where you just start to make some breakthroughs after, it's kind of like you're just digging and digging and digging, and finally you hit that turnaround point where
it's a tipping point.
yeah, that tipping point where it just gets easier. And I mean, I think with your voice too, it's kind of like you have to like break it in, and you have to like, it really is a muscle. It's a series of muscles that has to work. And
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like a leather shoe or something, or something where like the more you
I was
wear it,
thinking that too.
the more you're able to sort of like warp it. And but yeah, I don't know. I think as far as a songwriting thing, I mean, there really was, I moved home, and I mean, in my time in New York was really quite formative. It's like when I met Ian, and we started writing songs together, and I didn't even know how to play guitar until I really met Ian, and he sort of encouraged me and gave me a lot of guidance on that. Like, there's all these things where it's kind of like just kept chipping away at things across the board, and it just rose up to a level where it was finally like, okay, now this is something worth trying to finish and trying to release. Because everything prior to that point, I mean, I knew it myself. I mean, when other people would criticize it or be like, yeah, like it's good, but could sense that there's like, I mean, I knew myself that it wasn't at the par of the music that I love. But yeah, I mean, for just just that tipping point from just putting in, I mean, the hours and the work, it just kind of all started to happen. I mean, I think the vocal lessons that I took in New York was like really, really huge for me. I think I really learned how to feel what my voice should sound like. And I think when you're learning to sing, you have to find your voice. And I think a lot of people, again, learn by trying to sing other people's music, and that was
Yeah.
really helpful for me. But I think part of starting with a vocal coach and just learning proper technique is that you actually learn what your voice is supposed to sound like when you're not trying to make it sound like something else. Because if
Yeah.
you think about it with your talking voice, like we can all do impersonations of, like I can make my, voice sound like way higher, but like
I
my
can
natural
talk.
voice
I
is
can
down
talk
here.
in a British accent like this
Right.
for the whole podcast.
And so we do the same thing singing, right?
Yeah.
And if we're singing the way that we think that we're supposed to, we end up, it's just not as
Yeah,
natural. So
no,
there's some amount of,
I was gonna say it sounds kind of stupid since I've just been fucking around with singing in an amateur way. I feel like it's opened up the musicality in my normal speaking voice, where I'm less afraid to make my voice emotional speaking, or maybe like get excited or like do things with my normal speaking voice that I would hesitate to before I started messing around with singing, because I realized that your voice is capable of more registers and more expression than you think. And some of that transfers over to the normal communication and speaking, where I feel like I've definitely talked in much more of a monotone before I started fucking around with singing during quarantine.
yeah, it's interesting. I think one thing that I, again, learned from working with this vocal coach is that like there's a proper technique actually to like how you should be talking too. I mean, a lot of people talk in a way that, and I have really bad habits developed with this stuff where, you kind of like wear out your voice just through talking in a certain way. And yeah, the voice is just a fascinating thing. There's really so much nuance to it that I would have never understood until just, working with people who are professional vocal coaches. And I mean, I think this goes with anything that you want to get good at. It's really worth, investing time in learning from people who, can really introduce you some of the nuances of the techniques, and it'll save you a lot of time. And, I still don't have the best habits, but,
It's all part of the process.
It's all part of it. And, part of the thing is once you know the rules, you know where to break them. I mean, I certainly don't sing in perfect singing technique. I mean, I could sing in like an opera voice, and that's, you kind of learn the different flavors that your voice is capable of. And I think finding the voice that you end up singing with and trying to record with as a musician comes down to a lot of trial and error. And, for me, I ended up, I think, finding where my voice sounded really nice by learning songs by like Death Cab for Cutie. Like Ben Gibbard is a vocalist who I really admire, and Mark Foster from Foster the People is another vocalist that I really admire. And like I'm not bad at impersonating either of those people, if I want to, because I've learned how to play their songs, and that again was sort of a way of learning how to do it.
Something that I realized before we get off vocals, because I want to respect your guys' time too, because we're coming up on an hour and a half, is that many of my vocalists that I admire or people that I listen to are not winning American Idol. Right. They have beautiful voices and they have flaws, and those flaws are beautiful, and they're not even coming close to being a finalist in American Idol. Yet I'm listening to their songs constantly. So that kind of made me feel like, oh, like, why am I not experimenting with my voice? Like, I'm not winning American Idol, like, but who gives a fuck? Like, why shouldn't I just try to sing and experiment with it?
I think like music, no matter what instrument you're playing, or whether you're singing, I think it comes down to two elements. There's feel and there's technique. And I've always been personally a bigger appreciator of feel, which is, it's more of an X factor. You can't quite articulate it. When someone has good technique, but feel is just this. It's what makes you feel. It's something that kind of hits you, and you're like, oh, I like that.
Exactly.
And
like, it's not technically perfect, but it still makes you. It hits something inside you where you're like, oh fuck, like something's there.
Like I as a drummer, I've been drumming for a long time, like over 12 years, and I know my technical abilities are not amazing, but I'd like to think that I make up for it and feel, because that's what I put more of my importance on anyway. So
yeah, I think it's about just having the right amount of technique so that you can execute on the feel that you want, if that makes sense. I mean, I think I totally know exactly what you meant with that, Zach, where it's like my favorite vocalists are not people who are, like Christina Aguilera, or these people who do these like super fancy runs and stuff. I mean, I have an insane amount of respect for that, but I am way more interested in songs that convey emotion the best in whatever shape that takes. And I think people actually sound much more vulnerable and can better tell the story they're trying to tell if they're not doing it in this like Disney Channel theatery bravado, crazy vocal that's, super, pop or something. I mean, that's so, I mean, I've always had more of a liking for stuff that's a little rougher around the edges, just because it feels more real and more vulnerable and relatable for me. I think as somebody who's not a great singer myself, it's like if you listen to a singer who just kind of puts it all out there and is willing to not sound perfect, it almost like gives you permission as a listener to feel okay with the things that make you. And I mean, I think the feel part of music is the part that gives you personality. And I think every musician kind of stumbles upon that through time eventually. But I mean, I think one vocalist who's been getting had this huge career is somebody like Maggie Rogers, who, her voice is really unique. And it's great because it's unique, and it's not this, I mean, I think you know what I'm trying to say. It's not this, like, if you compare it to somebody like Christina Aguilera, like Maggie Rogers' music to me is like way more vulnerable and way more interesting to me because it has some imperfections to it, but in a good way. And I think the way that I look at music now is where imperfection and that personality and that feel is what makes it. Yeah, it's what makes you feel something. It's what taps into the soul and the spirit of your being. And,
it feels more immediate. When you hear something that you can tell has been created by someone, as opposed to just so heavily manipulated and filtered through technology that it loses its organic feel to it, And I think that's kind of what we're trying to go for. Well, I know that's what we're trying to go for. We're trying to create music. We're not adverse to using technology. We we love the tools that are available right now because they're quite honestly incredible. I mean, just what we have now compared to 10 years ago, making music is just stupid. But
Yeah.
It's like any special effects you've ever seen in a movie. If they overdo it, things start looking fake, actually, and they look worse. But if it's used very sparingly, just like the technology we have for music, it's able to sort of clean things up, but really keep the real stuff there.
There's definitely a balance to it. I mean, you're just trying to serve the art and the vision that you have for it. And I mean, definitely one part of our mission statement as a band is just trying to bring back, what is magical about a band. And that is some of this energy that only becomes possible when 5 people are having a good time playing in a room together in a basement somewhere. And that sort of that like alt rock, that punk element of
do it yourself.
Yeah, that sort of, the kind of just like fuck it mentality. I mean, I think that's a part of what feels lost to some extent in a lot of modern music today. I mean, I think a lot of stuff is so curated, it's so perfect, and it really is just in line with culture as a whole, with sort of the Instagram and these face filters and people auto-tuning their voices and trying to hide their imperfections. Like, we just want to make stuff that is like super authentic and is putting those things that are unique on display. Like, we don't want to sound like all the other bands on the radio. Like, we'd much rather, if we would want to sound like anything, we'd want to sound like a band from like the 60s and have it be rooted in live performance and musicianship and the humanity of it all.
I was listening to music with someone recently, and they were hearing the vocals, and they said, I think they're a little pitchy. And I think it's just because they weren't auto-tuned heavily. And sometimes our modern ear is so used to hearing auto-tune, or at least something heavily melodined, which is another corrective software, that we don't know what real vocals sound like when they're meshed together without heavy effects. And I know the band that I'm thinking of, they wouldn't have used a lot of heavy effects because they're great singers. So,
yeah, and there's just the thing that with like auto-tune is pitch is flexible as well, and this is something that a software like Melodyne will show you. For those of you out there who are listening and don't know, Melodyne is this software that gives you this really detailed control of like every single note in your vocal, where you can pitch it and change the shape of it and the tone of it. And a lot of pop artists, I mean, we've used it on some of our stuff just when it's been necessary, but I mean, overall, I think we try to make it sound as natural of a performance as possible. But you really see with these softwares where you can control the individual pitches, sometimes right on the pitch, a perfect pitch is not what sounds the best in the song. Like, you want things to have some wiggle room. And actually, this was something that Tony Dugan, the producer we were working with, mentioned, is that back in the day, instruments weren't tuned perfectly. Everything was slightly out of tune with each other, and it actually gave vocalists a better ability to sing and have it sound in key. Like, these days, everything with digital instruments where it's perfectly, it's like it's on, like a 440 hertz, like A note or something, and it's every single part of the track is perfectly in tune. So if there's any fluctuation in your voice, it sounds like a mistake. But back in the day and in these older records, people were tuning their guitars by ear. The piano in the studio like hadn't been tuned in, a year. So it's like drifted a little bit out of key. And that natural sort of differences in the instruments just gives you this pocket where the pitch can exist and it still sounds good.
That's something that I realized when I started recording vocals in quarantine, because when I was watching tutorials and people were talking about layering vocals, I was thinking, as someone who's never recorded any vocals before, I was like, why don't I just record it once and then I just copy and paste it 3 times and it'll just be layered? And this guy in a tutorial was saying, no, the imperfections in your voice on each take will make it sound better. You want like one take maybe like slightly flat in one spot and one maybe slightly sharp, and like when they're all together, that shit will sound fire because it's like it's filling each other out. So I was like, oh, it's like the imperfections in your voice are actually helping the song come together. And I was like, oh, fuck,
Yeah.
like that's crazy.
No,
It's
we
good.
totally use that technique on all of our stuff, by the way, of recording our individual vocals more than once and then kind of stacking it together. That's definitely a very frequently used trick in our book.
It's good to have technical knowledge and background and stuff, so that you can achieve what you want to achieve. But there's a lot to be said for just breaking the rules and doing things that are that some people might insult certain people in certain fields. Like the way we record some of our stuff in the studio would probably like make certain producers have heart attacks because it's just so wrong. But it actually ends up creating a sound that's unlike anything else because it's just not proper.
It's not that it's like wrong. It's just that, we for one have had to build this studio space for kind of the mentality of like, what is the cheapest thing that we can buy that'll still sound good? And so we have our microphones aren't super fancy. It's kind of a no frills thing. We have a few things, like if you can see the video of me, we have like some old synthesizers, which were, passed down from my dad to us. And, we have our select things that are, pretty like expensive investments, but as far as like our recording gear, it is nowhere near what, these big fancy studios have. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like something I think about a lot is, you can't like make, like the tools that you have are really important in shaping the outcome of your art, right? And so if you only have access to crayons and like colored pencils, like you're not going to make something that looks like the Mona Lisa, but you can make something that looks totally awesome and cooler than anything that somebody could have made with oil paint back in the day, if you just learn how to use your tools in a way that's unique to you. And just allowing your creative limitations to become part of your personality as an artist. And I think as a producer and as part of our recording setup, we've had to sort of embrace whatever, unique things that we do with our recording setup that are different. But that's the other thing, is that there's not really a good or bad. I mean, certainly there's some objectivity to like, your things you're recording are distorting. It sounds horrible. It sounds like you're recording it with a cell phone. But there's other things that are just a matter of flavor and taste and character. And, you can use a microphone that costs $10 and it sounds really cool. I mean, at the end of the day, too, everything is being bounced to an MP3 and being played through a phone speaker.
There's this rectangular thing on the wall behind Ryan, like this blue thing, if you see it, that we're using for sort of sound insulation, so that and it's from his bed when he was in New York.
It's like a foam.
It's like a foam thing, and instead of going and buying like, well, I think part of our creative process is because we're broke, but
that definitely factors into it.
Instead of going and buying a fancy thing, that works really well. And I was just like, oh, let me hammer this on the wall. And I took like nails and I hammered it up there. And it works so well right by the drums so that all the sounds that I'm making don't just bounce around the room and create, terrible bleed and stuff.
Yeah, there's a certain sense of just trying to work with what you got. And I think a good message to any person out there, whether they just have GarageBand or, they would see musicians like us with, I would consider what we have a pretty fancy getup. It's been, like 8 years of collecting material and all of us kind of bringing together the things that we've acquired in our years. Like Eric's drum set is this fantastic, like vintage set from a while ago. And we have, like an actual piano. It's like we have things that are, a lot of producers starting out don't have, but like, just even if you have just a laptop or just a single microphone, like you can make something amazing with that and just learn to embrace your creative limitations, because sitting around and sort of pondering the what ifs of, I'm never going to be able to make something that sounds good because I don't have this microphone, or getting into the mindset of you just have to keep buying and buying and buying. Like nothing at the end of the day can compensate for the songwriting itself and how you perform your instrument, whether that be your voice or your guitar.
Yeah.
It's like those are the things that people, especially when they're starting out, should focus most of their attention on, because I think I would like to think in some way that we've proven that. I mean, we
Yeah.
certainly have a good balance of like nice gear and really cheap stuff that's accessible to anyone starting out. But I definitely believe the idea of, even if all you have is a cell phone, like you can find a way to make good music and
There's
have it
like
be
people like
unique.
Claro, she did bedroom pop on her MacBook, I think, just
Yeah.
maybe with one like USB mic or something like that. And Pretty Girl, which was her big hit, I think her biggest hit still was creating it in her bedroom.
Well, there's a whole thing with like lo-fi stuff sounds cool. Like the
Yeah, it's character.
crappiness of your equipment can sound amazing. Like I personally, and I know a lot of people who like just like the sound of something that got recorded in a basement because it's all like every single part of your sonic character is sort of suggesting to the listener how it's made and what the environment that it comes from. So if something just sounds like you're sitting in
Yeah.
your bedroom strumming a guitar and recording into your phone, like that could be the right sound for the song that you're going
Yeah.
for. And I think for us, we have a lot of different things at our disposal now. We kind of are trained in the analog way of doing things, but also really embrace the best of what
Yeah.
recording technology has to offer. So I think it's good to educate yourself on everything out there, but
Yeah.
we all the time are finding just weird workarounds to figure stuff out. And I think it really came from just having a mentality of like, if we had to do something today or right now, like how could we accomplish what we're trying to do? And there's almost always like a really interesting answer at the end of that where it's, we need to get some soundproofing for the room, but we don't want to go out and buy a bunch of stuff. What do we have around the house that's has some absorptive qualities? And there's so many little things. Like I definitely want to do a studio tour of our place at some point and just show people how we've even arranged the room because it's a pretty small space, but we've learned how to utilize like every single nook and cranny of it for what it's worth.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good spot to end off because I want to respect your guys' time and to look forward to the Comet Lovejoy studio tour coming up on the YouTube channel. But yeah, no, this has been an awesome, enlightening conversation, and I know listeners will get incredible insight from what you guys have talked about. Where's the best place for people to follow you and check you out before we end off?
You go ahead.
I mean, wherever we're gonna have music out on whatever streaming service that you use. That's a good place to start. If you want to, we're gonna try to do more content on our YouTube channel to talk about behind our songs and some of our work process, where we hope to kind of help out other creators starting out. So YouTube's a good place. I mean, really, we're trying to do something unique with every platform, and we've probably been investing the most time in like TikTok right now, just because it's offering some unique opportunities for like organic growth. But I mean, yeah, just the usual social media. We're there.
Hell yeah!
We're still trying to
search
figure
Comet
out.
Lovejoy anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having us on though. It's
Yes.
we need to get out there, and I know that once we have plans of starting a podcast ourselves.
Glad you're bringing this up.
Yeah, I don't know when it's going to happen, but we would be honored if you were our first guest. That's for sure.
Oh fuck yeah, dude! I would love to. Don's
you could be recurring.
Don has mentioned it to me before. I would love to be a guest on the Comet Lovejoy podcast whenever that drops.
Yeah, for sure. We're gonna call it Feed the Dream, and we're hoping to just make it about people's individual journeys to kind of pursue their dreams and make it work and provide some practical tools to help them out. So I think being our first podcast, we'd love to bring you on and talk about how to record a podcast and how to start a podcast. Because I mean, it's really been inspiring as a friend to watch you grow all this stuff, and I mean, continues to inspire me with what you've been doing on TikTok and across the board. We feel lucky to have you as a friend, and we look forward to many more conversations.
Yeah, we want to bring on interesting people who do interesting things so that people can learn about them, but we also want to learn about what those people are talking about. Like, we'll bring on music producers, who can share some of their insights so that we can learn more about the stuff too. We're trying to take it from a standpoint of like we want to provide the platform for this individual or individuals to educate us and other people and the public.
In Comet like fashion, we're trying to just trailblaze a bit, and we're trying to figure this out of how to make music for a living and how to start a podcast, do merch, do all the fun stuff. So we hope to sort of document our own learning process and leave a trail for other people to kind of follow in our footsteps and the footsteps of other creators out there to make their dreams come true. And I think that's a very worthwhile endeavor for us, and something that goes beyond the music for us. That's inspiring to think about the longer term impact.
It certainly is. And thank you again, guys, for taking the time to hop on. This has been I can't think of a better way to spend a thirsty Thursday night. This has been great.
All right, man. Well, we appreciate it, and hope to talk to you soon.